That's right. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bridging the Gap here on the Jersey First TV network. As always, I'm AJ Malillo.
And I am Stephen Rambola.
And you can catch out all of your favorite Jersey First content on Jersey First TV YouTube's channel. You could check out The Nader Narrative with Elizabeth. You could check out Real Talk with Fernando. And you could check out all of the latest Bridging the Gap content over there. You can also check us out on jerseyfirst.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter and sign the pledge. And you can check us out on demand anytime at onnj.com. Stephen, what is up, my man? What's going on?
Whew. Listen, dude, we are in the thick of it. That is for sure. I think I've fully. I You know what? If I'm allowed a moment here, I just want to give
Take
you
your
some
time.
perspective as to what this past week has been like for me. So on Monday, I had an interaction with a classmate. We've been kind of, we realized we sit next to each other in a few classes and started talking. He's from Jersey as well. And this Monday, I show up and I sit down and he looks at me. And maybe this guy listens to the podcast. I don't know what he does. If he does, hey, so, uh, but he looks at me and he goes, you're kind of Aki. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the term Aki, it's like you're kind of built, you're kind of big looking. He's like, how do you have time to do that while you're here? It referencing the law school. And I looked at him and I was like, I just make. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's just, I was like, it's not fun. It's not glamorous. I wake up really early. I get about 6 hours of sleep and it's a lot of extra work. I make my own food. I prep my own meals. I write my own programming. I was like, on top of all of the demands that you and I share with law school, reading X amount of pages a night, prepping your cases, being ready for class, preparing for, quizzes, midterms, all those things. And he just kind of looked at me and he's like, I don't think that I could do that. And I was like, I don't know how I do it. I live every day with this like bizarre imposter syndrome. I don't believe that I actually do these things. They just kind of happen. And then I've basically been in like a mental turmoil since then because I've been watching my classmates and other people and how they work and stuff. And I really feel like in a very positive way for myself that I am a tremendous outsider in that sense, that I'm definitely heavily committed to two very involved things. And it was just weird to see somebody else recognize that. And I've been kind of having like an identity crisis about it because I'm like, well, what do people perceive me as? What am I? Now that I'm a law student, like I have a totally different schedule, a totally different identity. The way that I spend my time is totally different. So I've been kind of like, I don't know, I feel like I just cocooned and then like butterflied in a week. And I'm just completely embracing the path that I'm on, the rigors of, you know, the curriculum and the rigors of my other commitments. And I think the proof in that, and this is what I was going to share with you right before we had started, is it's been so affirming because it's paying off. So I had a big quiz first assessment last week, and I don't know, did we talk about it on the show? I don't
I
recall.
know we talked about it off of the show. I'm not sure if we talked about it on the
Yes,
show, but even if
yes,
we did, let's talk about it again.
yeah. So the we actually reviewed those quizzes this past Tuesday, and I was one of, I think she said there was three kids that got a perfect score on this quiz, and I was one of them. And it was like that hit for me, and I was like, yeah, that's what all this rigor, all this work is. And then we had another quiz in a separate class, and again, I somehow miraculously pulled out a perfect score, and the average on that I think was like a 72, and I was like, what is going on? So I say all of this for my message, I guess my opening message to the listeners is whatever dream you're chasing, whatever goal it is that you are pursuing, no matter how big or how small, how consequential or inconsequential you might think it is, or other people might tell you it is, if you have the passion, if you have the drive, find the commitment, make the time, and you will be successful. If it is truly what you desire, if you put in the work and you do that 1% extra every single day, you're going to get affirmations from the universe that your work is paying off, that you're doing the right thing, and that you're on the right path. And I think reflecting on those moments, the little wins, the small successes, make those days like today where I'm in class all morning, afternoon. I run home. I have 5 minutes. I sit down. We have the podcast. I got to go to the gym. Like, you're busy. You're moving. There's a lot of moving parts. Taking that moment of reflection and thinking about when it all worked, when all the pieces fell together, is really, at this stage of the game, I think what you need to carry on. And I say all this too because this is school season. Everybody is doing this, whether you are in high school, whether you're in undergrad, graduate school, professional school, whatever it might be. Even if it's work, even if you're in work, performance evaluations are coming up. It's the end of the year. Like, whatever it is you're doing, I think the big message, and I've been on this personal journey getting here for so long, is just stick with it. Just continue relentlessly forward, like you have no other choice. And so that's where I've been at. I also, this could be something we could talk about. I'm realizing it is September 21st, and we definitely did not discuss our books for the previous month, which I think we deserve a pass because both started school. One of us is very fresh to this, and one of us is I'll say seasoned veteran. But I did start a new book, an audiobook that I'm very excited. I will certainly have it done to be able to talk about for our first episode of October. But it's a book that I've been waiting quite a long time to get my hands on. I say it as if it's hard to get, but I settled on the audiobook. I took your advice, and I've been burning through it because it's as amazing as I thought it would be. I'm reading Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs, listening to, and it is just. I'm like 5 chapters in, and I'm already brimming, and I want to talk about it with somebody. So I cannot wait to get to the end of it and discuss it on the show. So that's my week. That's what I've been going through.
I love it. I love it. I think there's a couple of things that I kind of want to hit, points that you brought up. First of all, I'll address the book situation. When I picked that book for the month of September, I didn't realize how really mentally rigorous the reading and listening to the book is. First of all, it's very long. It's like 5 parts, probably like nearly 400 pages, if not more. And I have like 3 hours listening left, which honestly isn't that much when I commute about an hour every day. So I just kind of have to take a couple of commutes to use it, to finish it rather. So that'll be done. And then I'm going to definitely pick a shorter book for October because I didn't realize going in how rigorous it would be to listen to because it's very science based. And that's just a harder listen for me in general, right? Because I'm not really a science guy, but I like it. I enjoy the social science aspects of it. So we'll talk about it more. But so that's to address the first point. Secondly, I love that you picked the Steve Jobs book. I know how much you love Steve Jobs, and I'm sure I can't wait to listen to it because I'm sure it's going to be very interesting hearing your take on the biography of somebody whom I know you would admire so much. Now, after off the book topic, I want to hit on something else you said, which was, well, two things. One, you started to mention imposter syndrome. And I think that imposter syndrome is a really, really important thing to talk about because it is something that shows you're on the right path, right? If you don't feel an imposter syndrome, if you don't know what that is, that's like that feeling of why am I the one getting credit? Why am I the one that's here? I don't know really what I'm doing, and everybody's looking around and looking at me as if I'm the person that knows what's going on, right? If you feel that, that is a good thing. That means that you are in a position that you are able to convey confidence and positivity to the world around you, while at the same time being in a position that you know that you're not where you want to be or where you think you should be. And that's not a bad thing because that means you're going to continue growing and you're going to continue putting in the work, like you mentioned, Stephen, of that will eventually get you further and further down whatever your aspirational path might be. that you have to keep that imposter syndrome and recognize that, first of all, everybody's going through it. And second of all, going through it is exactly what you want, because you never want to settle. Because once you're settled, like, I could do this, I know what's going on, I'm the best, whatever, everybody's looking at me because I'm the one that knows what's going on, that's when you start to stumble and fall. Once you get that arrogant, that cockiness, that I'm not an imposter, I'm right where I should be, is right when you start to trip up, because you're not going to put in the work. You're not going to work as hard because you don't have to, you think, but that's not true. So having the imposter syndrome, Steve, is a good thing. You want to have the imposter syndrome. It's weird. It feels kind of like not normal in a way, but it is normal, and it's a positive. The other thing that I want to mention is, first of all, how proud I am, and I'm sure how proud all of the listeners are, of the success that you're doing. I can see the work that you're putting in, and I understand the work that you're putting in. So I know how hard it is. And I'm very proud of you for doing so. And I think that you are reaping the benefits and of putting in that time and effort and work. So I think that all goes to say that, like, you can do anything you put your mind to, right? And you can, if you put not just your mind to it, but you put the actions that are required behind it. For me, and I don't know if you feel like this in school, sometimes it's like I look back and I'm like on time with my readings, I'm on time with my assignments. In fact, I just finished an assignment that's due on Monday, like a writing assignment. I just have to edit it this weekend and then I can send it in. And it's like there there are points where it's like I don't realize how I'm doing it or when I'm doing the work, but I know that the work is getting done. But then I sit back and I'm like, wait a minute, how am I even on time with this? Because I feel like I didn't do anything today, but I did all of the work that I have to do, which is that's another weird thing. I don't even know if there's a name for that feeling, but that's what I've been struggling with this week, where it's like I'm right where I am, if not ahead, on reading for every class and the assignments for every class. And it's like, I feel like I'm doing nothing all day. How did I get to this point? But so I don't know. Maybe that's another form of imposter syndrome, but I'm not sure. And I don't know if you can relate to that.
The only reason that I was laughing so hard is because that's exactly how it feels for me. And like, bizarre parallel. I am about to finish. It's actually, as soon as we wrap this up, I have a writing assignment that's due on Tuesday that I want to send in for comment, and it's almost done. And if you, I mean, you definitely know me. And this was another one of those moments that I had, I think, similar to this. Prior to this experience in this particular school, I never would have considered myself somebody who gets work done early. I never would have considered myself a reader per se. And I find that, exactly like you said, I spend most of my days reading and being ahead on work. And that's, I think, the stem of my identity crisis that I'm going through right now. But to address the larger point, like you had mentioned, I think it is affirmative that maybe it's just that bizarre feeling of it's so natural that it's hard to comprehend. It's just what it calls for, and you kind of guys that rise to the occasion. And then another thing I think just worth mentioning before we jump into what we got to talk about today is I hope that in us sharing our experiences, granted, our experiences are quite parallel in that we're both, law students going to law school, different stages of it, but, the essence is the same. That I guess the big takeaway is the things we're talking about are applicable anywhere in your life, in any dimension. You don't have to be a law student to understand or to, get that same imposter syndrome or that feeling of, I'm ahead, but it doesn't feel like I've done anything. You could plug that in quite literally anywhere. And I would just hope to all the listeners that as you're hearing these things, you can think about the moments in your life where it does feel like that. And this is an affirmation to you, the listener, that exactly what you are doing, if you were feeling the same way, we are just as proud of you in whatever your pursuit is. I think it's really refreshing to sit back, share the successes, offer praise, and you know, I gotta give gratitude where gratitude is due. Like, you are absolutely on top of it, killing it. Second year, you have this big argument coming up. You're, you got your red mass. Like, you are so involved over there, starting organizations and whatnot. So it's just take the successes, acknowledge them, feel them, embrace them, but keep the work going. Continue moving forward, whatever dimension that is. If you're in high school, however that looks for you, if you're killing it in sports and you win your track meet, that's awesome. But guess what? You got to go to practice on Monday. Just because you won doesn't mean anything. So I think that's the big message, and why I find these conversations to be so refreshing is it's like that weekly reset where we can sit, we can recap, we can say, hey, this is what we did. This is how it felt. This is where we are. This is what went well. This is what went bad. We're in it together. The listeners, we're all in it together, but we got to keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that last point is, I think, a great like ending point in saying, just because you've had success this week or you've failed at something this week, you guess what? Monday comes along and it starts all over again. It gives you another opportunity to show how hard you've been working so much. I mean, sports analogies are so easy. It's like listen to any football, baseball, basketball player or whatever. Listen to any of them talk about it. They say the same thing. It's like, all right, we're 1-0 this week if you're a football player, but we haven't won for next week, right? You got to be 1-0 every week. You can't carry your record with you. So whether you had a couple of struggles this week, you've got a couple L's this week, guess what? Next week, get back up, keep up the grind, and you'll get some W's, It is what it is.
That's it.
That's it. All right, so we got 2 stories for you guys today. Both good Jersey stories, and I think we'll start, because we are heading into the election season. I think we'll start with a little bit of an election-based story. What do you think, Steve?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, so this one's out of Salem County, New Jersey, and it's on NJ.com. And it talks about how 2 courts have ruled that the current mayor of Penns Grove cannot run as an independent candidate in this fall's general election and must continue her candidacy as a write-in candidate only. So basically, what happened was the mayor of Penns Grove, Ladina Thomas, was elected in November 2019 after she had ran as an independent and defeated the Democratic candidate John A. Washington, which caused Washington to lose his 16-year stint as the mayor of Penns Grove. On March 24th, Washington had submitted a petition to have his name placed on the June 6th primary ballot as a candidate seeking the Democratic Party's nomination for the mayor's seat. Then, on June 6th, Thomas filed a direct petition to Salem County Clerk Dale Cross to have her name placed on the November 7th general election ballot as an independent candidate for mayor, and was the only candidate who filed a petition as an independent candidate, officials said. The clerk deemed the petition valid and accepted it as timely. However, in the Democratic primary, Washington won the primary with 84 votes. Thomas received 107 write-in votes. Now, Thomas also had received votes, write-in votes, under the Republican Party primary for mayor, which was 12 write-in votes, but lost that race to Louis Pascal, who won the Republican Party primary with 13 votes. So then the Republican and the Democrat who won the primaries wind up suing under what is called the sore losers law, which states that no petition for direct nomination, which for any reason is filed after the deadline, shall nominate to any elective public office a candidate who unsuccessfully sought the nomination of a political party to that office in the primary election held in the same calendar year, and no unsuccessful primary candidate shall sign an acceptance of such petition for direct nomination. Basically, that's all legalese for saying if you ran in a primary as a Democrat or a Republican, you can't then turn around in the same election cycle and run as an independent in the general election. Now, where this suit comes from is the fact that the incumbent mayor ran ads on Facebook telling people to write her in as a candidate in the Democratic primary. The courts so far have found that that counts as campaigning for the Democratic primary because she's being, campaigning as a write-in candidate. And therefore, since she lost that primary that she had campaigned for, she is not allowed to run as an independent officially. She can only run as a write-in candidate. So basically, she could say, you can write me in, but her name will not be on that ballot for Penns Grove mayor as an independent. And she's the incumbent. So that's going to make it tough sledding for the incumbent to keep her seat as mayor. So I guess the broader conversation is this, Stephen. What do you think of this sore losers law? Because they claim that it helps democracy, this sore losers law, because it prevents people from putting their own interests above their party's interests, adding their names to a ballot and splitting their own party's vote for a general election. Now, to me, Stephen, that sounds pretty undemocratic. It doesn't help the democratic process. It hurts the democratic process. And it just continues the issue that we have in this country of forcing a two-party system upon a population that might not really like the two parties at this point.
Yeah, yeah. So when I was running over this article, I initially I was like, yeah, I get it. Maybe. But here's the thing for me. So I think the conversation's a little bit different if the person whose name is going to be left off the ballot wasn't an incumbent, right? So I think that they definitely enjoy some sort of privilege because I imagine if you're voting for the mayor of a town, you probably already know who the mayor is. And if you like the job that that mayor's done, and it appears that she's doing a really great job at her write-in, candidacy, then I think it's easy. I think it's easy for her to, potentially get the votes to remain, in the mayor, even though her name's not going to appear on the ballot, just because she is the mayor, she has the name recognition, and simple conclusion to draw there. I think the issue for me arises is what if the person wasn't an incumbent? What if the general population that's going to be voting for the mayor of this town had actually never heard of this person or had not had this familiarity with the person? Then I think we get into that territory where I agree with you. It's not really conducive to the democratic process, and it does, in a really roundabout way, force a two-party system. I think it's so interesting, though, that they won't allow her to run as an independent. That's the part that I'm kind of stuck up on. You know what I mean? Why does it have to be a write-in?
Well, because she lost. So they claim that she lost the Democratic primary, even though she never officially declared candidacy in the Democratic primary. So that's a little sketchy to me also. But because they don't want people, it's the same issue that you see in the broader national election, where people, especially in the Republican Party, are nervous that if Donald Trump doesn't win the Republican primary, he's just going to say, fine, I'll run as an independent, which will siphon off all of the Republican votes. And to that I say, guess what then, Republicans? Police your own. Like, that's not the general populace's problem, because your party voted for a different person, and now this I guess outsider, so to speak, even though Donald Trump's not really an outsider anymore, this outsider, so to speak, is running as an independent and will siphon your votes. That sounds like your problem, not a democracy problem. And so it seems like it's the same exact thing in this race. Now, the Republicans and the Democrats teamed up, and they teamed up because they knew that they're both going to lose if she's in the race. So it's like, of course they teamed up.
Mhm.
It's the two-party system, exactly the collusion between the two parties that people talk about in the swamps of DC and Trenton, right? It's like they're not really in it for you. They're not really in it for democracy. They're in it to help their own, to scratch their own backs. They'll scratch each other's backs when it helps them. They don't care.
Well, and I'm glad that you point that out, because that to me was another jarring aspect of the story, because I believe if I'm correct, she also received votes in the Republican
Yeah.
primary as well. So is that the grounds that they are using to justify that she can't appear on either of those
That she can't
ballots? Like,
appear as an independent. The grounds is that she
yeah.
posted on Facebook, like, write me in during the Democratic primary.
It's so silly to me. I don't know why, and this is, again, we can extrapolate this isolated event at the local level to a national conversation, but running for office should not be as difficult as it is. I think the more people that we have who want to take the torch and run for an executive office, the better, because I think that exposes us to different ideas, new takes on old ideas, different personalities that people might find, more appealing than others. It's one of those things where if I'm looking at a pool of candidates, and I know we talk about this all the time, the 2016 Republican primaries, there was like 16 candidates,
Or
and
even
like,
right now.
yeah, sure, it's chaotic on a debate stage. Sure, there's a lot of heads to keep a hold of, but especially at a local level, I want as many options as possible so I can decide who is best for the job, whose values most closely align with mine. Because I sincerely doubt if you were to do a really deep look at any of these people and yourself, you're not going to just ping, I agree with one person on everything that they say through and through with my entire heart. That's not going to happen. I think democracy functions by making office so available. The fact that anybody can run, granted you're within the certain stipulations about, requirements to hold office. But for a mayor of a small town in New Jersey, why would you not want to have as many options on the table as you can to find the best person to take the lead and bring your town whatever it is that you desire? To have the state and the courts have to step in and say, hey, no, you know what? You actually can't run under X, Y, or Z party, I think is
Well,
a bit of a line.
right. I agree. I think it's fair to say, like, she says they say you can run, but you have to write in. You have to run in as a write-in and not like appear on the ballot itself, which puts you at an extreme disadvantage, right? Which is ridiculous. Um, I also think your point of saying like this is the incumbent mayor, and if it was somebody that they don't know, then it might be even worse. But I would say like the only reason it got to this point is because it was an incumbent mayor, right? The only reason that they're fighting so hard was because they know that they're going to lose if she's on the ballot. Because clearly people like her, right? She got she ran two close races in both primaries, and she wasn't even on the ballot in either of them. So that means she has cross-party appeal. Like,
Check.
it's clear exactly why they're doing it, and it's not because they're pro-democracy. It's because they're anti-American democracy. They're anti-American republic. They want the power. They want to keep the parties in power, and they don't care.
I think just another thing briefly worth mentioning about all this is exactly what you said. And I mean, maybe this, over the next however many years is going to develop, and we'll see how this, plays out. But access to get your name on the ballot is always one of those things that there's a lot of stipulations around, regarding even the debates. We can say, like, if you're a candidate running for president, you have to be polling at a certain number to even have the platform to have people hear your opinions, right? And we can agree or disagree about the utility of that. But I think when it comes to having your name appear on a ballot, if you are, especially the incumbent mayor who is currently running, there is no reason in my mind that I can possibly conceive of that your name should not be clearly stated on the ballot for the office that you currently hold, that you are trying to retain. It feels intrinsically, and I can't articulate it well enough right now, wrong. It feels like the wrong thing to be doing for whatever the reason might be. And I happen to agree with you. I do believe it is because that they find this woman to be a threat to their chances of, kicking her out of office. And that's why they don't want her on the ballot. But the fact that an incumbent mayor has to run a Facebook advertisement campaign to keep her office when just about every other mayor or public official who's running and it is an incumbent is going to have their name on a ballot is wrong. It is wrong. Like there's no way to justify it to me.
Yeah, I just think the law itself is wrong, regardless of incumbent status or not. If somebody loses a primary and chooses to run as an independent, again, police your own. Like, give them a reason not to do it if you're so concerned. But clearly, you're failing them, and if you're so scared that they run and siphon votes, like you're doing something wrong, my friend. Like, then you don't even think the strong candidate won. You think a weak candidate won. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the law is anti-democratic on its face.
I think that it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And just as a matter of principle, I know nothing about this town. I know nothing about their policies. I know nothing about what the town at large wants or finds desirable in their policies, but I hope this woman wins. I hope she wins.
I agree. That's not an endorsement, though, of course.
No.
Steve, let's talk about that second story.
Yeah, so this one, interesting. Again, we're putting on the lawyer hats a little bit today, I guess. But this is something near and dear to my heart. And I think we alluded to it a little bit last week's episode when we had talked about certain beach townships and their ability to enforce rules on the beaches, and Seaside Heights being one where they said they were going to start ticketing people who were going in the water when it was posted to not be in there. However, I would submit surfers don't ever get tickets when they're in the water, and lifeguards aren't there. So I wonder what the workaround on that is. But so this comes out of the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, and they're dealing with some issues going on, specifically in Point Pleasant with Jenkinson's and this other community, Ocean Grove, with their camp meeting association. So this comes out of basically a question of public access to the beaches, which is something that New Jersey has been, highly involved in since we've been established, truthfully, as one of the original 13 colonies. And this story from this is on the NJ Patch, actually does a really great job at illustrating the history of public access to beaches in the state of New Jersey. But what was going on was essentially this Ocean Grove Camp Meeting Association was closing the beach at certain points for 3 hours on Sunday mornings for religious observations. And they were claiming that those religious observations should supersede the public access rights. And they totaled it out. It was 15 Sundays, 45 hours out of the year that the beach is essentially not accessible to the public. I don't know what the utility of that was, maybe to illustrate how inconsequential that amount of time was, but that's the amount. And then as far as Jenkinson's goes, a separate issue that the DEP is addressing, both of them, Jenkinson's was locking and chaining all of their beach access points. And if you're unfamiliar with Jenkinson's, they own the boardwalks and businesses, and they have lifeguards and stuff that govern those beaches when they are open. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection has told both of those organizations that their closures of public access to the beaches violate the agreements that the state made with them when they got their permits to construct on the beachfront property. So they're basically saying, and this is a direct quote from the Department of Environmental Protection, quote, "The permittee cannot limit vertical or horizontal public access to any dry sand area covered under permit, nor interfere with the public's right to free use of the dry sand for intermittent recreational purposes." And it continues to go on, some more legalese. But this is essentially a public trust doctrine, which is what they date all the way back to when we were one of the 13 colonies, saying that the grants that formed the private property in New Jersey never conveyed the public trust rights, because when New Jersey was established as a colony, those areas were, quote unquote, reserved to the crown, which I think is so interesting that this has been the state law essentially for the entire duration of the United States of America as we know it, and for decades before that. Um, and this article goes on to talk about how one of the centers of this debate over so many years has been beach badges, and how towns have gotten into so much legal trouble using them, enforcing them, charging unreasonable rates in an attempt to keep certain portions of the population off of their beach to maintain a town image. There was issues about certain, I think it was what was it, the
Charging
Bayhead
more.
case.
Yeah, there's certain cases of like charging more for non-residents of a town compared to other
Yes.
residents, and
Yes. So I just think the moral of the story here is New Jersey, very specifically, has been sort of the epicenter of understanding this public trust doctrine when it comes to public use of the beaches. And we are still living in that battle vis-a-vis these situations going on right now where beaches are locking up, their access points. And the state basically said that the only really reasonable reason, that's really funny.
that's really lawyerly right there.
That is very lawyerly. Uh, for a township or a private entity to restrict public access is if there is some sort of health or safety concern. So if you recall, during COVID, people weren't allowed on the beaches. I guess just for the community, you don't want to be close together, have people gathering outside, whatever it might be. And like we talked about last week with the issues going around with rip currents. So if being in the ocean presents a danger to somebody, they're allowed to block access for that. But any other reason, you're not really allowed to stop the public from getting on the beaches. So I'm curious to see how this resolves, especially considering that the Ocean Grove Association had sort of ascertained that there was or I'll say they alluded to some sort of First Amendment question in their, right to practice religion. So we'll see, but I think it's very interesting.
So I think the two cases are interesting. I think the first one, like you said, there's going to be this interplay, and I don't think it's happened in the New Jersey courts between the First/14th Amendment. So if you don't know, the First Amendment would be the freedom to practice religion. The 14th Amendment applies the First Amendment to the states. So basically the suit is going to be, we have a First and 14th Amendment right to close this beach down for religious observance on these Sundays because they're the owners of the beach, right? So I think there's going to be an interesting interplay between the public trust doctrine, which is like an ancient common law doctrine dating back, to specifically this issue to the colony of New Jersey, but dating back to, ancient British common law. So thousands of years, right? So basically, the question becomes, how does the fundamental freedoms of religious liberty juxtapose with this public doctrine? So that's going to be an interesting case, 100% for sure. And I don't really know. If I had a hunch, if I was a betting man, I would probably say that in the state of New Jersey, they're going to be like, no, the public trust doctrine beats you. Do they go up to the Supreme Court? I don't know. What does the Supreme Court do? I really don't know. That could go either way. The second issue, the Point Pleasant issue, is going to be a little bit more interesting because it's a little bit more of a nuanced argument, because the reason that Jenkinson's was closing the beaches was for those safety concerns, right? That's why they put the chain there. Now, the argument is you didn't put any signage up saying, beach closed for rip currents or beach closed because no lifeguards or whatever the case may be. So the question becomes now is like, do they have that obligation to notify the public as to why they're closing the beach? Presumably, they probably do, but they still have that right to close the beach, right? Because as long as they notify you saying, hey, the water's too dangerous, we can't have people going on the beach, then they're probably able to do it, if I had to bet. Now, then their question becomes, well, if the water's too dangerous, you can limit people's access to the ocean, but can you limit people's access to that dry sand? And it becomes a little bit hairy, right? Because wet sand is 100% can't be owned by anybody. It is free use. Anybody can go on it at any time. And that's kind of one of the big backgrounds towards this public trust doctrine is like there's only one way to get to wet sand, which is allowed by everyone, and that's through dry sand, right? Which is owned by some. So that's where it's really like complex and interesting property law. And I'm sure, Stephen, when you take property next semester, you'll learn all about it, like I did.
Yeah.
I sent this article right to my property professor from last semester as soon as you sent it to me because I thought of how interesting it was. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the courts play it. If, like I said, if I was a betting man, I would say that the religious exemption probably won't fly, but the other one, they're just going to be like, you should put up a warning.
I'm right with you, and I think this is just another point worth mentioning to illustrate how long this public trust doctrine has been in effect. The website on the Department of Environmental Protection actually quotes Roman civil law, quote, "No one, therefore, is forbidden to approach the seashore, provided that he respects habitations, monuments, and the buildings which are not like the sea, subject only to the law of nations." So this really, when they say that all roads do lead to Rome, I guess even the beaches in New Jersey take us to Rome.
Yeah, and like, and as we wrap up here, like the TikTok trend that's been going on now, where women ask their boyfriends how often they think about Rome. If you think about the beach, you think about Rome. So there it is.
This is as true as it gets. And one very, very quick anecdote I will say, because this did come up in real life for me. I was taking a ride out to the beach, which in Florida for me now is much longer than it would have been back home. And when I had mentioned to my roommate, who is a Florida native, that it's crazy to me that I could walk onto the beach for free, that I don't have to buy a badge or a day pass, he was like baffled by the fact that in New Jersey, we have to pay to use the beaches. So just to illustrate, this is not the case for everywhere, for everybody. And this is truthfully a bedrock of the New Jersey shore life, I guess. And I agree with you. I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. It's going to be another chapter in the very illustrious history of public access to beaches in the great state of New Jersey. And I'm excited to be a part of whatever comes out of it because it is a new chapter.
For sure, very interesting. But with that, we're going to have to wrap it up here on Bridging the Gap. And I'm AJ Malillo.
I am Stephen Romola.
And I hope you all have a wonderful week coming up. Keep up your grind, keep up fighting. You got this. We'll talk to you next week.